Alright, today we're going to talk about the coordinate plane, and I should first just start off by saying you don't have to write the definitions if you don't want to. Basically what I'm looking for you to have here is the coordinate plane, the grid basically, and then all the different pieces of where they are. So I want you to have the diagram basically. But remember, when we're talking about a plane in math, we're not talking about something that flies through the air or anything like that. We're talking about a flat surface or a two-dimensional surface that can extend forever in all directions. So for instance, if I look at my two black lines here, those are actually called axes. You can see that within this paragraph. Axes, so they're actually the x-axis and the y-axis, which I'll talk about and describe here in a second. But they extend forever in the left and right direction, and then also in the up and down direction. It goes on forever that way, so this thing can extend forever as a plane. All right. So the two axes, they intersect each other at a perpendicular intersection. Perpendicular, that's just a fancy word for saying 90 degrees. They intersect each other at a 90-degree angle. We'll talk more about that as the year goes on. But the one thing that I do want you to know is that where they cross, this is called the origin. Okay, so that is the origin. And then we have a horizontal axis and then a vertical axis. So the horizontal, which is this green line, we'll use green for that. That's going to be our x-axis. And then our vertical axis is the y-axis. There we go. All right, so those are your pieces basically. And so we actually, we'll get into this on the next slide, but we talk about these different coordinates or points that we can put on this thing, almost like Battleship if you ever played that game before, where you'll try to guess where the position of those other ships are by calling out a letter and a number, and it correlates to a position. Same deal here that we'll talk about. You can have different places for different points, which, like I said, we'll talk about in a second. All right, so we'll use the x-axis and the y-axis to do that. And basically, if you look at this here, we've got four different places that points can end up. They're either going to be right on one of those axes, or they're going to be in one of four quadrants. So you can see that this is broken up into four different spots. So this is quadrant 1. They use Roman numerals for these usually, I don't know why. That's our second quadrant. Quadrant 3, and lastly, quadrant 4. So it starts off in the top right corner and goes counterclockwise down to 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 different quadrants, and that just splits it up into 4 different parts. All right, so let's actually look at graphing some points here. All right. So as I was saying, I was getting a little bit ahead of myself here. But we have these things called ordered pairs, and they consist of an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. That I will want you to have down. So ordered pair consists of an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. It's written as xy, meaning if we have a point, this is how I like to remember it. X is always that horizontal motion first. So whatever number is in there, we're either going to go left or right. If it's a negative number, we'll move to the left. If it's a positive number, we will move to the right. And for the y-axis, we're either going to go up or down. So basically, we're going to do two motions. We're either going to go left or right, and then we're going to go up or down. We always go left or right first. For instance, we'll look at a couple of these. But what basically happens here is the negative or the positive sign will let you know exactly what's happening. So let's take a look at some examples. All right, so move this over here, and we'll do a couple of these points here. All right, now if you don't see numbers on your coordinate grid, each little mark will represent 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Same with going up, unless otherwise specified. Sometimes you got to be careful because if they provide a picture for you and they go up by 2s, that's something you're going to want to know. All right, so if I graph A, this means I'm going to go over 1, that's positive, and up 3. So over 1, up 3 puts me right there. So that's point A. Sometimes you'll see it like written like this, graph A13, and that would just mean we're naming that point A. Okay. All right. So basically what we did there is we just went over 1, up 1, 2, 3. All right. Let's look at the second one here, B. So if it was written like this, it'd be the same thing. Point B is negative 2, 2. So I'm going to go back 2 this time and up 2. That puts me right here. That's point B. Okay. And I'll just put the other ones up here quickly here. C, that's negative 4, negative 5. So I'm going to go back 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's point C. If it was named, it would look like this. Okay. They don't always have to have a name. So for instance, B, let's pretend it doesn't have a name. We're just going to go over 1, down 2. So there we go, that's just a point. Now all of these points landed in the 4 different quadrants. So basically, if you have 2 positive like if you have 2 positive numbers, for instance with A, you'll end up in the first quadrant. If your X is negative and your Y is positive, you'll end up in the second quadrant. If they're both negative, like C, you'll end up in the third quadrant. And if your X is positive but your Y is negative, you'll end up in the fourth quadrant. Alright, so that's just a quick review on how we graph those things. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow. This will lead us into the introduction to functions.